Good evening and welcome to Information Please, your Peoria Public Library on the air, bringing you information about your library and your community. And this evening my guest is Roberta Koshalski, and we're going to talk some more about this year's Peoria Reads project. Hi Roberta.
Hi Tricia.
I wanted to get you to come back. I know we talked about this last summer a little bit when we first picked our book, but now there's some really concrete plans and we're into people reading the book and talking. So let's talk about what kinds of things people can do to be part of Peoria Reads.
Okay. I want to remind everyone that, of course, Peoria Reads is our annual One City, One Book project, co-sponsored by Peoria Public Library and Commonplace Family Learning Center.
You've been our partner since the beginning.
Since the beginning in 2001.
Yeah.
And the past couple of years, Bradley University has strengthened the partnership with us. And Bradley this year chose an academic theme, a theme for their academic year of civil rights, standing together, civil rights past and present. And they chose that because 2014 is the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And there are so many anniversaries that have happened in the past 6 months and over the next year that it seemed to make sense that Peoria Reads would also jump on the civil rights theme.
Yeah.
So as you recall from the last time we talked, we selected the book Warriors Don't Cry by Melba Patillo-Beals. And Melba was one of the Little Rock Nine, one of the high school students who was selected and chose to work to integrate Little Rock High School, Central High School in Little Rock during the 1957-1958 school year. And she wrote her memoir with excerpts from her diary included. And it's a very first-person account of her thoughts and feelings from when she was in high school that year and the abuse and torture she went through. From people, black and white people, who were against the black kids going to the white kids' school, so to speak. And it also talks about the support she received from friends of both races.
Yeah, and I think maybe students now don't understand what a huge thing this was, but these are 9 students who wanted a better education. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to go on in their studies. And so they were willing to go through this gauntlet of abuse and being screamed at all the time to try and get that education and set the stage for us, because what was happening at the high school, they didn't want them there.
Right. And these are students, the Little Rock Nine were students who were very good students at their school.
Yes.
And involved in student council and other activities. And so, yes, they wanted to go to the big school that in many cases they walked past to get on the bus for the long ride to their own school.
Right.
And so that was their neighborhood school. They just couldn't go to it.
Yeah.
So that's our Peoria Reads selection. It was published first as an adult book by the author, and then the author abridged it some to make an abridged copy available for high school, middle school age students.
Right, which is also still good for new readers or English as a second language folks who may want to participate. It's just a little maybe less complex to read.
And to help people out who are reading Warriors Don't Cry on our Peoria Reads website, we also have discussion questions that we've gathered from different sites. Schools across the nation have read Warriors Don't Cry, and so there are a lot of discussion guides and study questions available, and so we've put links to those websites on our Peoria Reads website.
That's great, because we of course will provide a discussion group leader almost to anyone who asks, if we can possibly do that. But if people just want to have their own book club, their own family, their own classroom, they can go and get those questions and read it. We just would like to know that you've done that, because then we can add you to the group of people who've discussed Warriors Don't Cry.
Because of course we do keep statistics for any grants that we get or future grants to know how many people are reading the book and participating in the programs, and then we'll also do surveys here and there to find out, if you like this kind of book, what kind of books would you like us to do as community-wide reads in the future.
Yeah, great. Great.
Let me tell you about another activity coming up.
Yes.
Not too far here into the future, Bradley University is sponsoring Dr. Terrence Roberts, another one of the Little Rock Nine. He's coming to Bradley University on Wednesday, November 20th at 6 p.m. He'll be at the Michael Student Center Ballroom.
Oh, wonderful.
He's another of the Little Rock Nine, and he too wrote a book about his experiences. Now, Melba Patillo-Beals was the first member of the Little Rock Nine to write about her experience, more in a first person, what it was like when she was right there. And Dr. Roberts wrote a book called Lessons from Little Rock. Okay. It was first published in 2009, and it's now available in paperback. And this is more him looking back now on what it was like and what he learned from it. He became a psychologist afterwards. He studied and got his PhD. And
so these really were very bright students that took on that challenge.
Yeah, each of the Little Rock Nine have gone into professional fields. Melba Beals is a communications consultant, and he's Dr. Roberts is a psychologist. He has his own private practice, and then he has a management company that he also runs. And I have not read all of Lessons from Little Rock because you don't always have enough time, but
right.
I will read it before he comes to Peoria here.
Yes.
But he talks more about his experiences as an adult, looking back on what happened then and tying it to now.
What's going on now?
He's got, he also writes about a page or two on each one of his Little Rock Nine companions and what they were like then and how they're still like that in many cases today. The one, Elizabeth Eckford, who's the face maybe who's the most recognizable because she was the one that appeared in many in newspapers, on book covers. She was a little girl in the white dress carrying her books, and there were a lot of white people screaming at her as she walked into school. It was unfortunate that when they were getting ready to go into Central High School that first day, she didn't get the message that they were going to all go in together. And so she was walking by herself, and she was surrounded by angry people who didn't want her there.
Yes.
And he describes
her.
her.
Military.
Yes. He describes Elizabeth Eckford as very shy always, but always listening. And when she did, when she was ready to talk, she talked with authority, and people listened. And so Dr. Roberts wrote about what it was like growing up in the South around Little Rock in Arkansas when they'd have the birth notices in the paper. Yeah. And first they'd have the notices where Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so welcomed the birth of their daughter so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. Those were the white people notices. The black people notices were in a separate section underneath where it was just John and Sally so-and-so welcomed the birth. There was no Mr. and Mrs.
Right,
and,
no titles.
Just the little things that were very noticeable and separated the races. So again, he's going to be here in Peoria on November 20th, Bradley Student Center, 6 p.m., the Michael Student Center Ballroom.
That'll be exciting.
And it's just interesting what I've read of this so far, the similarities and differences between this and Warriors Don't Cry. Warriors Don't Cry is told from the high school students' perspective, whereas Dr. Roberts has written more from his perspective now and looking back on the lessons
and
he's
his
learned.
education and understanding people because of being
His
a
psychology
psychologist.
background.
That'll be interesting to hear. Yeah.
A little further into the future,
Okay.
and maybe for now, Lessons from Little Rock is an adult book.
Yes.
But we found out earlier this year that Congressman John Lewis, member of the House of Representatives from Georgia, has written part one of a 3-book trilogy. It's called March. It's written in graphic novel format.
Oh, nice.
So it's
very easy.
It's very accessible to adults, high school students, possibly middle school students, and adult new readers as well. Because it's just...
Yeah, and adults may think, oh, I'm not going to read a graphic novel, but I would suggest try it. You know, you read all those cat cartoons on the internet, you might as well read this, which is a graphic novel, just well illustrated, and people may find they enjoy that format.
And really, what do? You know, when I noticed in the table of contents that there were photos in Terrence Roberts' book, you know, you want to look at those and see the pictures of him growing up.
Yeah.
And so in the same thing, don't you want to read something that has pictures along the way, drawings? And this March is book one of this upcoming series. It's going to be a trilogy, and it takes Congressman John Lewis's life from the beginnings to right around the time he was in high school, college, and meeting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the time of the nonviolent sit-ins. And so he's going to do 2 more books. I'm not sure how far. Now, Bradley University is looking at having Congressman John Lewis come to campus in March, April, May of 2014.
That'll be nice.
That will be
if you can come.
Terrific. And if classes can take a look at March, that's another book that does have a study guide. I think that was produced by John Lewis to think about what questions to talk about with your students.
Yeah, with your students or with him when you come see him. Yeah. We always have lots of books going on. You've got more here.
Yes, and civil rights can be talked about with any age of kids, and typically in Peoria Reads, a lot of teachers like to involve the elementary school students, and they ask us for companion books. What, you know, have you chosen a list of books that we could either read to students or that would be good for parents who ask? And there's a ton of them on civil rights, of course. Of course,
yes.
And 2 that I picked out of the stack I checked out of one of our branches recently. This one is Freedom's Summer by Deborah Wiles, and this in the form of a picture book, good for ages about 4 to 8, and it's told from the eyes of the young white boy who's best friends with the son of the lady who works for his mom.
Okay.
And the black boy's name is John Henry. And they do everything together. They swim in the creek together because John Henry's not allowed to swim in the public pool.
That's a pretty typical Southern relationship for many, many years, that there was a servant in a white household, a black servant in a white household, and the children grew up playing together. I know that went on during plantation days and slavery and went on forever. And you just had these close-knit friendships, but then couldn't really complete that friendship because of things like can't go to the pool.
And the narrator of the story, the white boy, goes into the ice cream shop, and he has his nickel and John Henry's nickel, and he goes in and buys the ice cream cones. And the grocer says, you know, you're going to eat both of these? You must be hungry. And he just says, oh, one of them is for a friend, and he dashes out. And so the news comes out that a law has been passed and the public pool will be open to everyone. It'll be opening the next day. And so the boys are very excited. They have their nickels again and they're excited to go. And they walk up and they see a big truck, and they see actually John Henry's older brother working with a shovel. They're filling over the public swimming pool with tar. The city has chosen to close the public pool rather than to let the black kids in swimming together. And this book is beautifully illustrated. You see an illustration of the 2 boys sitting on the diving board after the pool's all filled in. And they said, we don't want to swim here anyway. We're going back to the creek. And then the story does end with the 2 boys. The 2 boys are going to go together, each one holding his nickel, to go into the ice cream store where they may or may not be allowed in.
Yeah.
But
Well, and obviously this has won an award. It has one of those stickers.
It has one of these stickers for the Ezra Jack Keats Award,
Okay.
and also the Coretta Scott King Award.
Okay.
So
So those in the know have declared that an excellent book.
yes. As is, some people might recognize the author Jacqueline Woodson, a very well-known author who, this book is The Other Side. And what's interesting, and I didn't realize it right away until I was, reading them, this one is written from the point of view of the black child, the little girl named Clover, who lives. Her yard is on one side, there's a wooden fence, and on the other side is another house where Clover's mom says, don't go over the fence, you'll just get into trouble over there. And but she notices when she's out playing on her swing or playing jump rope with her friends in her yard that there's a little white girl on the other side of the fence looking at her. And they look at each other, and Clover plays with her friends, they're playing jump rope, and at one point the white girl says something like, can I come and jump rope with you? And one of Clover's friends says no. And Clover says, well, I don't know what I would have answered, maybe yes, maybe no. But as time goes on, goes through the season, and the next spring it finally stops raining, and Clover goes outside, and the little girl's out there, and they get close to the fence, and the white girl climbs up and sits on it. And Clover says something about, my mom told me I can't come in your yard. And the white girl said, well, there's no problem if you just sit up on the fence. I can't go on your side, but let's sit on the fence. And so by the end of the story, Clover and all her jump roping friends are sitting on the fence with, I think her name is Annie. And it does end with, maybe somebody someday is going to tear this fence down.
Oh,
and
nice.
Once again, it's the children doing things together, and these are both great books to be read to elementary school age kids, and to have some nice discussions about friends and differences and all the similarities, and so
yeah, and that's one of the things is for children to understand, that people are people, and you can find your friends anywhere, and also to understand the great injustices of the past and how much progress we have made and how we need to keep going.
Because it's just not that long ago.
No,
that
not.
All this was happening.
Yeah,
and,
certainly in our lifetimes.
Yes, and you see the photographs, and
it is hard to believe
home.
it's the 50th anniversary.
Yes,
very hard to believe that. Yeah.
And so these books too, on our Peoria Reads website, we do have a list of other books about the Little Rock Nine, or about we have a section of famous civil rights leaders to read more about, and then we've got a growing list of books recommended for elementary, middle, and high school students on the same topic, fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah, and of course that's PeoriaReads.org. Very
Yes.
easy to find, and it's a wonderful resource for anybody who's interested. If you weren't interested before, go take a look, and you might find something of interest. Even to spend one afternoon out of your life looking at some of these things can really change your thought process.
And if you don't feel like you have time to commit yourself to one of the books that were written by the Little Rock Nine, excuse me, if you do have just an afternoon, sometimes a young people's book is the way to go. You can find out, what happened, see photographs. There are a lot of timeline books that have photographs of different landmark events, not only in the legislation, but also just in, tragic events that ended up changing the United States.
Yeah.
We've got nice stories on Rosa Parks and on Ruby Bridges, and those are all available.
To learn the important players in this, long and sort of violent many times process. But it's also nice to look and see the progress that has been made in 50 years. Yeah. And there's more about civil rights with Peoria Public Library.
We are encouraging our book clubs to read the book and have a discussion about them. The Biography and Nonfiction Book Club will be reading Warriors Don't Cry, well, reading it ahead of their February monthly meeting.
And of course, that's open to anybody.
Right.
And you don't ever have to come back. If this is a book you want to participate in the discussion, you're more than welcome people to come to this discussion. And you don't even have to have finished the book, right? Of course, you might understand it a little more if you've read it all. But even to just get some insights to come to that discussion is a great thing.
And we have a number of people in the Biography and Nonfiction Book Club who take the time and do additional research as well as reading the book. So yes, if you haven't finished the book or even haven't read it but want to learn more, that's a great book club to attend because you'll learn a lot just in our hour-long discussion. Other book clubs are being encouraged to read the book as well or to just do a discussion. For example, Delta Kappa Gamma sorority, teachers sorority, has I think they call it the One Book Club, because they typically just do one book discussion meeting a year, although I've heard this year they may do two. And they'll be reading and discussing Warriors Don't Cry as well. And then we'll be doing discussions, of course, at each of our library locations.
Yes.
And that are open to the public.
Those will be on the library calendar as well as on the peoriareads.org website.
Yeah. And the library calendar is where you can find the date of the February Biography and Nonfiction Book Club meeting. It's the second Sunday, but I don't recall the exact date of
number.
that.
Yes.
Bradley will be doing a few other things during the spring, and they'll be moving along. Some of the biggest ones will be on our peoriareads.org website. One of them that's very interesting is coming up on March 24th. It's a panel discussion called The Great Migration, about the African Americans who moved out of the South into the northern and Midwest cities. And there are some people that you will recognize involved in the discussion. The discussion will be facilitated by Carol May.
Okay.
And panel members are to include Honorable Mary McDade, Catherine Timms, Eleanor Cowling, Ernestine Jackson, and Jean St. Julian. And these people have a wealth of knowledge about civil rights and the time period that we're discussing.
The Great Migration, yes. And it's interesting to me how often you talk with your coworkers or people you meet somewhere and they're all going back down south for the holidays because that is where their family is, and like grandparents or whatever is still there. And there is actually, and I don't know if we have this on the website, we'll have to get it, there is another wonderful children's book about the Great Migration, and I think it's called something like The Yellow Car. We'll find it. But that's a wonderful one about a little girl who doesn't understand why they're all getting in the car and moving, from their house in the South to an apartment in a big city, but describes very, very well what that experience was like when people came for jobs and really, really shifted the cultural perspective of this country.
And that's what Melba Patilla Beals did. She, it's written in Warriors Don't Cry, where she went up with a family member to see other family up in Ohio and see how different it was there. That she was much freer to walk around without fear of other people. And I recall here in Peoria, friends of mine, black friends whose families moved up here because they heard about Caterpillar and they heard about the opportunities, and around the same time. And you just, it's amazing to compare the journeys we've all taken.
Yeah, how your family got here. Which, of course, you can use our genealogy department to find out more about that.
They say all of history is biography.
Yes.
And how true that is.
It is.
Bradley will also be doing a human trafficking lecture coming up in 2014. And a Bradley University Theater Department is going to present vignettes of civil rights trials. There's a lot of focusing on the legislation. There were continuing civil rights acts through the years. we know about Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, and that's what made it illegal for public schools to be separated,
Yeah.
the black schools and the white schools, and that's where Little Rock 9 came from 3 years later in 1957. But then the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was the one that eliminated or made illegal
Yeah.
discrimination on the basis of race or color or religion or national origin, both by federal and state governments, as well as in public facilities, and
Right.
especially hotels and theaters and restaurants. And of course, as Freedom Summer tells us, some places just closed down. The
Yeah,
owners
they
decided
just not going to do this
instead of
because their prejudice and their worldview was so limited that they just couldn't accept anything else.
well, it was interesting.
And we should note too that this was such an important thing, and this was often based on people of color, but continues to protect people today of many kinds. We've had the whole gay rights movement, women.
Women.
It used to be perfectly acceptable to say, you're a man, I'm going to pay you more, you're a woman, I'm going to pay you less.
Or put out a job posting and say man needed for something.
And go back even further, you get things like no Irish need apply. So
And
we should all be glad, no matter who we are, that we have this protection. But you know what? We are out of time, and so we're going to have to let people go to our calendar and see what else is going on or call you.
Dr. Terrence Roberts, November 20th, Bradley.
Yeah, exactly. And you can look, I'm sure Bradley has a calendar as well, but Peoria Public Library .org has our complete library calendar with a lot of these, plus all the events are listed on PeoriaReads.org. You can find the book titles, you can find out how to get a discussion leader for your group, you can find out what the discussion questions are, lists of books for your family or your group, your school. So we'll hope everybody will participate in Peoria Reads this year. It's an important topic and a great anniversary to be able to celebrate. We'll see you next week on Information Please.